Okay, so today it is my pleasure to announce and introduce Cindy Miller to you all. She's a good friend, someone who has worked very hard behind the scenes for the Chamber with the Dancing with the Chamber Stars program. So that is coming up soon. Cindy has had 35 years experience in education and administration. She is currently the director of Columbia College, Kansas City, and she has been there for 6 years.
Yes, you're so good.
Well, yes.
Wow, she does her homework.
I did. And so it's my pleasure to introduce Cindy today. She's going to talk to you about communication skills for supervisors.
Thank you.
Take it
Thanks,
away.
Laura.
Sure.
Well, as Laura said, you know now how old I am, or that I am old. But a lot of what I do in terms of just working with my staff and faculty, I've kind of developed some staff training kinds of activities and skills, and it's funny because when I got into education, it was all about being there for the students and serving the students and that kind of thing. And as I went through my whole career, I discovered that it is incredibly difficult to manage people and to be able to get them motivated, to be able to get them all moving in the same direction and to accomplish the tasks that need to be done. And so I kind of backed up a little bit and did a lot of reading and looked at the kinds of things that we need to do in order to be good managers. And it doesn't just happen. In fact, I want to show you, I love Dilbert. I use Dilbert in everything. I have a Dilbert on every one of my staff meeting agendas. But this sequence is wonderful because it talks all about communication skills, which is what we're going to talk about today. And the pointy-haired boss tells Dilbert, ask Morgan what type of materials he recommends we should use for the case. And Dilbert says, Morgan has no communication skills. Everything he knows is locked in his skull and will never come out. And then Dilbert says, is this going to look like my fault? And of course the pointy-haired boss says, quitter. Now Morgan, the man with no communication skills, says they decided to do option one. And Dilbert says, who is they? What's option one? Are they testing or implementing? And then Morgan says, you just earned yourself a creepy stare until the topic changes. And finally at the bottom, again, poor Morgan, the man with no communication skills. Did you get the results from the stress test yet? And Morgan says, stress tests have to be performed under controlled conditions. And Dilbert says, has anyone ever explained to you the yes-no form of questions? So anyway, that's kind of an extreme situation, but I wouldn't be surprised if some of you have met people like this in your own business. This is kind of a basic communication skills for managers kind of thing. Some of the stuff that you're going to be hearing today, I'm sure, is not going to be new to you. It really is just an opportunity to get back to basics and think about what we do as managers. And frankly, this is helpful information to remember just in working with our colleagues and coworkers and even our own supervisors. So communication skills for good managers is essential, and the best ones are known for their effectiveness in communication, but it's not magic. They can be learned, and it's imperative to success. You cannot be a good supervisor without communicating well. And there are kind of four components that we're going to be talking about today, and they're progressive in terms of we're going to talk a little bit about body language. Communication is just not the verbal communication. Obviously, body language is a component of that. I also wanted to tell you, I'm sorry, I do have handouts that have everything on these. I'm not going to hand them out yet because some of the activities we do, I don't want to give you a heads up on it. I don't want you to cheat. But I will be giving you handouts for everything at the end of the session. Welcome. Thanks for coming. Body language, active listening. Again, we're going to talk a little bit more about that and do some exercises related to that. Active listening, I'm sure most of you have heard of, but it is more than just paying attention to the words. It is basically becoming fully engaged in a conversation, paying attention to not only the words, but what they mean in total, paying attention to how the words are communicated, what the person's demeanor is, that kind of thing. And it really is not only just sitting there listening to what's happening, but you becoming engaged with regard to asking pertinent questions, getting clarification, making sure you fully understand what the person is sharing with you. Once you've got those down, then we move to a little bit more advanced kind of activities related to effective feedback. again, we have all been in situations where we either were recipients of feedback, good or negative, or had to share that with someone else. And especially when you're managing folks, if you have to provide feedback that is not always positive, it can be challenging and difficult and make you feel kind of uncomfortable. So we're going to talk a little bit about what we can do to make that process better and to make sure that it ends up being a process by which people grow from. And then finally, the thing that people hate more than, well, not everybody, but conflict resolution. If you are working with any person at all, you are darn sure to have conflict at one point or another. And so it's very, very important for you to have good conflict resolution skills. And fortunately or unfortunately, managers really have to take a higher road than anybody else, because if they have folks reporting to them, they have to set the tone and be a role model to model those good conflict resolution skills. So sometimes you really have to take a big step back from yourself, and even though you would really like to lay into somebody as a manager, it is not appropriate for you to do so. So again, we're going to talk a little bit about what you can do to make sure that you handle those situations in a good way, whether you're actually involved in the conflict or whether you're mediating a conflict between others. Alrighty, so let's talk about body language. Let's just, this is the audience participation part of the program here. I want you guys to tell me, let's start out with what you consider bad body language to be. And I, yes,
not to interrupt you.
That's okay.
I am one of those people that's cold all the time.
Yes.
So I very often and I know it is like a huge bad.
And that's okay. I think that's perfect, because that's the kind of stuff we need to talk about. Because it's not only what we're projecting, but also trying to read what others are projecting, and that's absolutely something you have to take into consideration. But in other cases, when it's 100 degrees outside and somebody's standing like that, you're right. Crossed arms generally, not always, but generally mean that it's the person is not listening or they don't agree or whatever. But yes, that's, as long as you're aware of it, that's the important thing.
But I mean, what is an alternative? Like sometimes I'll try and purposefully drop my arms while I'm standing there, but I always resort back to this. I mean, I have verbally told people before, I am just cold, and so I'm standing like this because I
Yes.
don't know what else to do.
And that's perfect. As long as you tell them that, say, please don't assume that because my arms are crossed that I'm not paying attention or listening to you.
I think typically if your arms are crossed but you're smiling and you're talking to somebody, you know, it's more obvious than like if someone's is promoting a bad vibe, it's more.
Right. Exactly. So what are you doing right there? What are you doing right there? Yeah, I was going to say that's good illustration. What are you doing right there? What were you doing? Leaning back. You're gonna be a really good example of what we're doing here. Lean back. What else? What other kinds of things? When you're talking with somebody, how do you know that they're disengaged, that they're not paying attention?
No eye contact.
That's good. Don't you think it's ironic that everybody in here is female that's taking the session? I'm just saying.
But Jeremiah's not.
So yeah, come on.
I know that, but you're an observer. You have to be here. Okay, what else? What other kinds of things? I'm sorry, what? Turn away, that's a really good one. What else?
Working on other things at the same time, I'm guilty of that.
So distracted then, okay. Okay. Okay, what else?
Just thinking like when you put your head in your hand and feel bored.
Yeah, that's a good one. Folding head up with hand.
Yawning, right?
Yes. Yawning, that's good. Falling asleep. Anything else?
Rolling your eyes.
Rolling your eyes. Oh my gosh. Kids, hello? Do you have any kids?
Oh.
They perfect at it too.
Well, do you know where mine get it from?
I was going to mention that, but I'm going to let it go right now. Okay. What else? What else? Sighing. Oh. Okay. All right, we got it. All right, very good. Obviously, there's more. We'll talk about them a little bit, but that everybody already instinctively knows that these kinds of things mean, not always, but generally mean, this person isn't listening to me, they're not paying attention, they don't agree with me. So, of course, we talked about the bad. So, probably mostly the opposite of these, but there might be some other things. What kinds of things demonstrate that somebody is attending with you, that somebody is paying attention and agrees or is happy to be talking to you? Eye contact. Okay, what else?
Head nod.
Nodding, that's a good one. I do that all the time. I kind of look like one of those birds with the water. Stop myself. What else?
Participation.
Okay. Whoops.
Smiling.
Yes. Okay, what else?
Asking questions.
Okay.
Repeating.
Leaning in, I'm sorry, what'd you say?
Repeating what they're saying.
Uh-huh. Oops. Leaning in. You guys are experts at this. You could do this. Anything else? Okay, pretty good list, and again, right on target. That's exactly what it is. If we look at the stuff that we mentioned, again, one thing we really didn't talk about, but good use of personal space, and it's interesting, and some of the stuff I've read, men have a tendency to really utilize that component, that when they're wanting to demonstrate authority, they'll do one of these, where they're very, very close and trying to show dominance. Women tend not to do that, but it's also, you have to find a happy median. I wouldn't stand back here and talk to you. I would walk forward and be probably 2, 3,
You're not gonna be here.
4 feet, but I'm not gonna be in her face unless she really makes me mad. So that's one component of trying to make sure you're not invading their space, but also close enough that you can have a good conversation with them. You already mentioned making eye contact, sitting or standing straight, open posture, instead of leaning back or slouching or whatever. You're up and attending to what's going on. Leaning toward the speaker, you mentioned that. Looking interested. The opposite of rolling your eyes, saying, oh, okay, well, kind of, not scowling, but looking like you're really concentrating on what the person has to say. Smiling at appropriate times. When somebody is telling you a really, really sad story, you obviously don't want to be smiling and nodding at the time. That would be totally inappropriate. Mirroring the speaker's body language. And here's where something that you said about the crossed arms, that might be, that would be a situation where that would be okay, because, you've either verbally said or you're demonstrating that I am attending to you. But, if the person you're talking to might do that or mirror you mirror what they're doing, it subconsciously kind of puts you in a connection with them. If they kind of tilt their head, then you might want to kind of tilt your head. Some of this stuff you just do naturally, and you don't want to be too conspicuous about, oh, well, they tilted their head, I have to tilt my head now. But it's just kind of what you do. And again, I think, not always, but I think women tend to be more engaged in those kinds of conversations, and women as managers are a little bit more in tune with the body language that surrounds a conversation between coworkers or with a supervisor and employee. Sometimes clapping is appropriate. If something really wonderful happens, it's okay to clap or clasp your hands, that kind of thing. And you guys already mentioned all of the bad: looking away, staring at the floor, scowling or looking angry or annoyed, shaking your head. What does that tell you? Uh-oh, I went down the wrong path there. Rolling your eyes, laughing or smirking at inappropriate times. The crossed arms, again, as long as it's not really, really cold. Slouching, sleeping. I know, it's church, right? That poor pastor stands up there, and I know that there are people behind me. I can hear him snoring. Fidgeting, playing with the hair closed, checking the phone, that distracted thing. Oh, you're not important enough for me to attend to, so I'm going to check this. So, turning body sideways, away from speaker, and pointing your finger. Doing that a lot. You're trying to make a point, and you're trying to be in charge. So, obviously, that's the kind of stuff that you want to avoid. Now, I want a couple people up here to practice. Who wants to volunteer? Dun, dun, dun. I'm going to call you out. I'll start from the back first. Come on down. And you too, come on down. Oh, yes, you. No, there's nobody behind you. Actually, all I want you to do is just practice. Okay, first, I want you to be the bad posture person. And I want you guys to have a conversation. Just talk about what you do, introduce yourself, and maybe talk a little bit about, the kinds of things that you do in your workplace.
Well, why don't you talk and I'll listen.
This is awkward.
That's the whole point.
Yeah, Yvonne, CJC. I work in finance here for the fire district. I'm out of Station 3. This is our training facility.
Man, she's good. So, Yvonne, I know this was all contrived, but how did you feel talking with her when she wasn't paying attention?
Kind of more like I'm talking at her instead
Yeah.
of to her.
Yeah.
This is nice.
Yeah. Yeah. See, she couldn't resist. How did you feel acting that way toward her?
Rude.
Yeah.
Well, and when Jacqueline went away, Yvonne was like, what's going on?
I know. She's like, what are you looking at? What's going on over there? Very good. Okay, now let's do the good body language, and you can go ahead and introduce yourself to her, and you can demonstrate what good body language is in paying attention to. Jacqueline, right?
Right.
Okay.
Hi, Yvonne. I'm Jacqueline Reed. I
Jacqueline.
manage the Blue Springs Library here, the South
Oh,
Branch.
that's a
And
great place.
Thank you. You try really hard to make it a welcoming place. I actually helped plan the power hours. I apologize for being late.
that's fine.
Got a lot of meetings, you know how everything is. I see you guys have a big facility here. I imagine you have a lot of training and meetings here. And
Yes, we do.
thanks for having us. We appreciate it a lot.
Absolutely. Anytime.
Thank you.
Well, see, the conversation was longer, number one. They got into a little bit more detail. And you were even attending to me and other people around. That was wonderful. You did a great job. And the other thing, if you noticed, you talked a lot more with your hands, and it was kind of like pulling her into that circle kind of thing. You reached out and shook her hand immediately and got her engaged. So good job, ladies. Thank you so much. Very good. Okay, so that's basically what the body language portion is all about. Next thing we're going to talk about is active listening. Now, the last time I did this session was with 30 people, so I'm not sure we're going to be able to pull off the activity I have here, but we're going to go ahead and give it a shot. Okay, active listening, as I indicated earlier, it actually has some components of good body language, but it goes beyond that. And some of the things that you had mentioned, Bonnie, are the things that we're talking about. When you are engaging in active listening, you actually are observing and focusing on that person. You are completely enwrapped and attending to the person that you're speaking with. You put away those environmental distractions. You may close your door. You may turn off the phone. You may turn your computer monitor away or something like that. You stop working. You stop watching TV or reading. How many times have our kids come in or we're watching the news or something else on TV? Whatever. So you have to pay attention. And you think as you listen, but you're not prejudging, but you are really thinking about what they're telling you, because the next step is, again, something that Bonnie mentioned. You ask pertinent questions. You ask for some clarification. You're trying to understand exactly what that person is telling you. It's okay to take notes. I mean, especially if you're in a situation where someone, one of your employees is telling you about a situation that needs to be handled, it's perfectly appropriate to take notes. That's not distracting at all, because you are actually trying to record what that person is telling you. You acknowledge and respect the speaker. You treat them like a human being. And you repeat back phrases to clarify what the speaker said. So, okay, let's do, I need two more. Well, actually, here's what we're going to do. This exercise requires, again, it's going to be an illustration of, I guess, inactive listening versus active listening. But what I'm going to do, I'm going to select someone from the audience, and I'm going to have them read silently a story. And then this person is going to go to the next one. I'm going to start with you, obviously. I'm looking at you. I'm attending to you. What I want you to do, I want you to read this. Do not share this with anyone. I want you to read it and put it down, and then I want you to tell her what the story said, but tell her privately, don't say it in front of the whole group. And then I want you, this is the telephone game, I want you to tell her, and I want you to tell her, and I want you to tell her, and you to tell her. We're going to involve you, Bonnie. So here's the situation. In this particular exercise right here, you people that hear the story, you can't ask questions. You can't repeat back for any clarification. The person that is telling you the story, all you're doing is just trying to remember the parts of the story so that you can relay it to the next person. So, all right, I'm going to have you go ahead and go. So read it yourself. Now, obviously, you know what I'm trying to get at here. You can pay attention. I'm talking to the rest of the folks now. The whole idea about active listening is that the more you pay attention, engage, and get involved in the story or narrative or whatever the person is telling you, the better you're going to be able to recall it. The better you're going to be able to communicate it to someone else down the line. And again, in whatever business you're in, it's incredibly important to make sure you got your facts straight, to make sure you understand the importance of the message that the person is telling you. Go ahead and just, yeah.
Do I tell her?
Yeah, yes, privately. Just tell her privately. You can't look at it. You just have to tell her what the story is. So, anyway, and the second time we do it, we obviously will try and employ some of those active listening techniques to see whether or not there's a difference. Obviously, I've done this before, and I have discovered a difference. The stories that I have are pretty nonsensical, so it's the kind of thing that you wouldn't necessarily be able to jump to conclusions. They're kind of a silly little story. So it's not something that you could immediately recall because there are components of it that are kind of silly.
I just totally forgot.
All right. Good point. All righty. Are we ready now? Bonnie, why don't you tell us what you heard about the story? Tell us what the story was.
Pretty brief. Grandpa likes noodle pie, and Grandma makes it, but the pirates came and took the pie. That's all I got.
Okay. Well, that was definitely in the story. But why don't you go ahead and read it and that.
Okay. It was because of her wonderful noodle pudding that Grandma met the pirates. Grandma cooked the noodle pudding and set it on the windowsill to cool. When the delicious aroma wafted out on the warm sea breezes, 3 hungry savage pirates, who happened to be sailing past, stopped their ship, dropped the anchor, and rowed ashore. They swaggered up to Grandma's house, grabbed the noodle pudding, and ate every last bit. Then, as if that wasn't savage enough, they popped Grandma into in a pirate sack and kidnapped her. The pirates pulled up the anchor, sailed away, taking Grandma with them. It wasn't a bad life. Grandma cooked lots of noodle pudding, and she learned to sing old pirate songs. She also sailed around the world and retired to Bula Bula.
Okay. So there were some components of that story that got lost, right?
Sure. Yeah.
And the kernel of it was there, but we didn't know how many pirates. We didn't know what ultimately happened to Grandma, which is an important part of it because she got kidnapped, So.
I think I turned into noodle pie too.
And it was pie instead of pudding. Yes, but that's okay. Thank you for playing. I appreciate that.
Oh my God.
Okay, now I'm going to start back up here. For the second story, another kind of nonsensical one, I want you guys to employ all of those things that we were talking about in terms of active listening. I will go ahead and start with you, Bonnie, and I want you to read through the story, and I want you to tell her, but she can ask questions. And this time, you can refer to this and respond, okay? Mm-hmm. And then the next person, I don't want you to hand the sheet over because we still need to do this verbally. But then I want you to tell her, and again, you guys can engage and discuss what happened, and maybe some of the questions she asked will remind you some other components of the story and vice versa. We'll go ahead and do that. I think we did 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 before. Is that right? Yeah, well, let's do the same people. We'll leave you out of this because you volunteered for it. So we'll have you tell her. All right. And again, this is kind of silly, but it's it's supposed to illustrate what we're talking about here for active listening. And I've actually, all the activities I've got here today, I actually have used with my own staff. So it's not just a function of communication skills for supervisors, but it's also communication skills in general when you're interacting with people. We have situations where our folks really have to provide good customer service to our students and faculty and other folks. And so obviously it's very important for them to be able to communicate well and present a good face for the campus to the folks, all of our constituents. So it's important. And some of the stuff, even though you think, well, we communicate every day, I talk to people every day, I'm good at it. Not necessarily. That's why we're going back to the basics and thinking intentionally about the best way that we can communicate to be most effective in our daily dealings at work, that kind of thing. So.
All right, ready?
All right, go ahead and tell
Okay,
us.
so there's a bear family. It's mom bear, papa bear, and sister bear.
Mm-hmm.
One day sister bear comes home with scratches on her face and she
Mhm.
tells papa bear that there's a bully at school and it's tough bear.
Mm-hmm.
So then papa bear decides to teach her how to stand up for herself, and then she does.
Okay. Bonnie, you want to go ahead and read the story? So we see how close it matches.
One day, Sister Bear came home crying. Her face was scratched and dirty and her clothes were torn. Papa and Mama Bear asked her what had happened. Had she fallen? No. Was there an accident? No. A no good, nasty, rotten bully named Tuffy beat me up, and for no good reason, Sister Bear said. So Papa Bear went to the school to talk to this bully, and when he got there, he was shocked to find out that Tuffy was a little girl, even smaller than Sister Bear. He turned around and went home and started training Sister Bear in the art of self-defense. The next day when Tuffy started teasing Sister Bear at school, Sister Bear hit her square on the nose with a right cross. Tuffy Bear never bothered her again. Or Tuffy Bear, yeah.
Now, we wouldn't actually recommend that you engage in physical violence, but let's talk about, does this story retain more of its integrity as it went through?
It's tiny bit, but not much.
Yeah, yeah. And again, it's because they're kind of nonsensical. They're not practical kinds of stories. But there were, I would venture to say, more elements of the original story in this one than there were in the first one. And again, like I said, we've done this. I've done this with larger groups and had them go through like 12. So it's a hoot when you get to the end of that one. Let me tell you. But again, it's just all I want to do is illustrate the whole concept of active listening and trying to attend and pay attention to what's going on. So you got the first two down. Let's go to feedback. And again, I would venture to say most women are intuitively fairly good at this. Not always, I'm sure. But again, when we're working with people, at some point you're going to have to give negative feedback. And you have to learn to do it in such a way that it actually ends up being motivational or allows for some kind of behavior change. And the way to do that is to employ some of these ideas here. When you're giving feedback to someone, you need to give it with care, because depending on how the person reacts, it could be very intimidating and scary and potentially hurt their feelings. If they have a real vested interest in the situation you're describing and they think that they're doing a great job, it can be pretty debilitating when somebody tells you, nope, you didn't do that right.
So even with our kids.
Yes, yes, absolutely. That's a perfect
They curl
example.
their hair or
Yeah.
they put their makeup on,
Yes.
and you're like,
Yes.
how do
So
I tell her?
that's right. That's right. But again, it's important. You still want to give them the honest message, but you can do it in a way that demonstrates how you care. And you, again, given with attention, you just don't blow it off. You just don't, make a smart comment offhand. You actually give it with the active listening components, where you're really, really attending to that person and paying attention to what their response is. It needs to be directly and fully expressed. Again, sometimes it's very, very difficult to give negative feedback on something that somebody does, because it strikes at the very heart of who they are sometimes, or they believe it does anyway. So, and the other thing too is that to the extent that you can, you need to remove the emotions from it, because you are setting the tone for this conversation. It's even though that person might be emotional, you need to be caring, but don't get sucked into that emotion. They might start screaming and yelling and hollering and getting mad, and that is the absolute wrong thing for you to do. You need to just keep being calm and communicating the message that you need to communicate. Timing is incredibly important. And again, you see this with kids more than anybody else. If they've done something wrong, it doesn't do any good to tell them a month later. You need to tell them immediately. You probably do not want to tell them in front of a bunch of people. You might want to pull them aside and talk to them about it. But again, you have to kind of assess what the best timing is for those kinds of discussions. And I'm going to give you a little handout that you can use to include positive as well as negative. Have you guys heard of the feedback sandwich or feedback on a bun? Okay. Well, I'm going to go ahead and hand these out. The best feedback, and it's not contrived and it's not lying, you're not making stuff up. The best feedback, especially for an employee, is that you sandwich it between something positive. So you start out with something positive, you communicate the negative feedback, and then you end up with something positive. And again, it seems contrived, but it really is just an effective tool to ensure that the person hears what you're saying. And it also demonstrates that you do care about them, that you do value their contribution to the team or to your work environment. So, for example, if I was telling you that, well, let's say, I'm sorry you can't wear green at work kind of thing. So you know what, I really appreciate, how you're on time every day. You've been just a wonderful asset in our office, but there is a college rule that nobody can wear green. So, that's something that we probably need to talk about, how you can move that out. Yes, you go home and that kind of thing. But you know what, we can resolve that very quickly, and I know that you're going to continue being a wonderful contributor to our team, and I really look forward to working with you in the coming days. Now that was a little silly. I don't know her work style or nothing, but that's kind of how you approach that, where you give them the message that you're a valuable employee, and because of that, I want to help you move to that next level. I want to help you grow. I want you to I'm giving you this feedback because I care about your performance and I want you to do better. Sometimes a feedback conversation is a little bit harsher than that if there's some really serious problems, but you can still approach it in the same kind of way, the feedback on the bun kind of thing. The feedback that you give needs to be readily actionable, checked, and clarified. And what that means is that you have to be specific. You have to focus on specific behavior, a specific task, responsibility, situation. If you are giving feedback and saying, I don't like what you wear. I mean, that's okay. Can you be more specific? I mean, you really need to focus on the issue that needs to be changed, and you need to help that person. If they can't figure out a way, well, how do I resolve? That's where you come in as a supervisor or coworker or friend and say, well, let's figure out how we can approach this together. What's the best way to do this? Maybe you suck on the telephone and say, you know what, that's a really big part of your job. So what can we do to help you get better at that? Do you need to do some seminars? Do you need to go to the power hour for Blue Springs Chamber? That's the kind of stuff that feedback always has, that component of here's how you're doing, here's the performance, here's the issue, but here is how we're going to resolve it, rectify it, or make it better. So again, as a supervisor, it's your responsibility to help guide that person along that path. So anyway, all right. I don't know if I had enough, but those are also in the packet that I'm going to give you guys at the end of the day. All right. Oh, and here's what I just talked about. Are you getting hungry? Sorry. That was just the best picture I could find on the that was great. And again, it goes back to you got to be honest, be clear, and be open. Now, here's another component. What may happen when you're doing this? Some people get very defensive and do not accept negative feedback well, and so they might spin it and say, "Well, you're a terrible boss, and you're never there when I mean, they could come back with some very harsh things. And again, you need to take a big, deep breath, step back, recognize that that's just their defense mechanism, and that you really need to tend to focus on the issue that you're discussing with them. And it's okay to say, well, I'm sorry you feel that way. Can we talk about that another time? Because right now we're talking about you. because, you know, maybe they do have some legitimate concerns and you need to be open to that. But focus on the task at hand right now and set that aside for another day. So,
I had an employee that was notorious every time. Well, blah, 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 blah doesn't do this, and da, 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 da doesn't. No, we're talking about you
Right.
right now.
Right.
Everyone, you know, you don't know what I discussed with them.
right.
This
Yes.
is you and I.
Exactly. Exactly. And that's a perfect response to that, because it's, some people have been taught that that's the best defense, is to deflect. You know, I'm not responsible, it's everybody else's fault kind of thing. So the more you can help them take ownership and responsibility for the issues that they need to address, the better employee they're going to be. And in the long run, it's going to help them grow professionally anyway. So, but yeah, it can be very hard. It can be very hard to do it. Any other comments about that? Any other anecdotes? Okay.
I think using we a lot is good instead of you need to, you know, we all as a team need to work
Right.
better on this, or
Right.
I just think they're less defensive
Right.
times with that.
Yeah. Well, and the more people you have on your team, the more personalities you have, and the more that there's a potential for them not to mesh well. I had one gal when I worked at DeVry. At that point, I was supervising a group of 12 people, and they were all different. It was like herding cats. I mean, they were great people, but boom, boom, you know, they're all going off in different areas. And there was this one gal who was one of those that was just great on data entry and back office work, and she just cranked work out, and she was accurate and wonderful and productive. And she had the worst interactive skills I have ever seen in a person. And she was like in her mid-30s. I don't know how she got to this point in her life without somebody, you know, really smacking her upside the head or something, because she was just harsh and abusive and just not very fun to be around. And she was a challenge, you know, and again, it was given with care and all this, and she would just be hateful and mean. Wow. So yeah, it took a while. And the funny thing is, when I ended up leaving there, she was the one that cried the hardest. When I was like, really? You sure didn't act like you liked me very much, but okay, whatever. So, you know, you never know. You never know what kind of an impact you're going to have on somebody's life, and you just got to keep planting those seeds. So, anyway, any other questions about the feedback? So, let's see here. Okay, conflict resolution. My least favorite thing to do. I hate it. I hate it. So, and it's just something that you have to do, because inevitably you will have situations where people will disagree, and they you know, they have to get along, and you as a supervisor, like I said, you have to take the higher road than anybody else, because you're the one that's going to have to manage the work in the office. So anyway, okay, steps to conflict resolution. Now, what we're going to do, we won't do for very long because we're about at the end of our time, but I do have some role plays, and I'm probably going to pull you guys up here and talk about this. These are the things that you need to keep in mind when you're in a situation involving conflict. And again, you're the one in charge. These are the things that you need to do. Respectfully ask to speak to the person with whom you have conflict. This is not something, it does need to be well timed, but it does not, you do not need to confront the person in front of a bunch of people, and you do not need to call them out and start off with you know, a very aggressive stance. You need to still be respectful and say, we really need to speak. I'd like to speak with you. If you need to set an appointment or schedule a time, that's fine, but do it. And as you are taking charge of the conversation, you're the one that identifies the reason for the conflict. And some of the same things we've talked about in effective feedback is the same style that you use here in terms of, here's a situation because I care about the productivity of our team. I really need to talk to you about a situation in which your behavior was not what I would have expected. And so you take charge, you identify the reason. And you do express your ideas and feelings assertively. And it's, while you don't get emotional, while you don't get all fired up, you do need to communicate how you felt about the situation. You know, it might be a situation where you say, you know, I was disappointed that you acted this way in a group meeting because I felt, you know, it reflected badly on our team, and I know you're not like that. I know that you're a better team member than that, blah, blah, blah. Allow the person to respond and listen to them. Again, pull in those active listening techniques because there might be a very good reason for why they did what they did. I'm not saying it excuses the behavior, but you need to understand the big picture, especially if you're going to resolve the conflict and figure out what to do from here forward. So again, it's not something where you're just talking at the person that we talked about earlier. You are talking with the person and getting some response back. It also helps in many cases if you allow the person to respond and talk to you about the situation. It might diffuse some of the emotion from on their part, so that they're actually, you know, being able to vent or to tell somebody about their side of the story, and the fact that you're listening helps a lot. Remain calm, control your emotions, and then again, it's not just you did this badly or we've got a conflict here, but okay, what are we going to do? Now that we've established what the issue is, what are we going to do to resolve it? So you take that next step to actually correct the situation. And ideally, after you've discussed different alternatives, hopefully you can come to an agreement. Sometimes that won't happen. There are times, especially if you've got like peer-to-peer conflicts, there might be times when you just can't get them to play nice. You just can't get them to get, you know, along. And again, you as a supervisor have to take control of that situation. You might have to say, okay, time out. We're going to just take a break and we're going to talk about this at another time. Or maybe bring a mediator in. Or maybe reschedule another date. Or you know, maybe there might be issues that you might have to restructure how your office works. Maybe give different tasks to different people, so that the people that are in conflict are not constantly at each other's throats, kind of thing. Again, as a supervisor, you have to be in tune with what's going on, and the best way to resolve that to ensure that the productivity of your team is at its highest level. So anyway, let's do this. I'm going to go ahead and hand out the packets now. And let's see here, at the very end, I guess it's like 2 or 3 pages in, there are conflict resolution role plays. So, and we'll just do a few of those. Anybody, let's get, oh, okay, yeah, let's do that. Just pass those back.
Keep passing that.
Yeah. And I really would like everybody to play. So, let's see, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4. Actually, Bonnie, you don't have to play this time, thank you.
Okay.
But the participants, I would say, you guys go ahead and pick a role play you want to do, and we'll talk about whether or not you're following these particular steps.
I like number 7. I like the number 7. Do you like number 7?
All right, you decide who's going to do what.
Kids, but okay. We can do 7.
All right. So introduce yourselves, please.
Partner, like
This
we're
person.
talking about work.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
So you guys are in the conflict. You are the one who's been excluded by, what's your name?
Ashley?
Ashley, and what's your name?
Trisha.
Okay, Tricia. Ashley is your supervisor, but she specifically excluded you from an important meeting directly related to your primary job responsibility.
And I'm gonna confront her.
Sure.
She's coming.
Yes. Yes, you go ahead and talk to her, and keep these things in mind. And both of you have to kind of keep that in mind, so.
Hey, Ashley, do you have just a couple of minutes?
Yeah, sure.
I noticed earlier that you met with Linda on ABC account, and I'm typically the one that manages that, so I was just kind of curious why I was not part of that meeting.
Oh, no, you're doing a great job. It wasn't, we just thought about maybe adding an additional person in the account. It's gotten so big. I just kind of wanted to gauge her feeling and kind of gauge your feeling now that I have them in front of you.
Okay. I didn't appreciate being left out. I mean, I understand where you're coming from, that you guys, needed to talk about expanding the team, but being the primary person on the account, sometimes I feel like, that should have been the decision I was part of.
The client was just a little bit, maybe just some additional help on it. Not that you weren't doing an amazing job, but they just expressed that it was starting to balloon and that maybe we needed just some additional people from the team.
Very well done. Look at you guys. Let's give them a hand. Good job. Now, how did you feel at the end of that? Did you feel like it was resolved?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, we're good. We're good. We're good. So Ashley. Yeah, I quit. So how did you feel when she approached you with that?
Yeah, that made perfect sense.
Okay. All right, very good. Good job. Okay, you two ladies next. So, please introduce yourselves.
I'm Robin.
Okay.
Yvonne.
Okay.
Hi Yvonne, how are you doing today?
Great, how are you?
Oh, pretty good, except I don't know if your son has talked to you yet, but my daughter had said that I guess they had a fight yesterday about something. She was really upset about it. Do you know anything about
No,
it?
you didn't mention it.
Oh, well, I guess she said that they were fighting over a toy or something in class, and the teacher was distracted with someone else, and he got really kind of aggressive with her and yanked it out of her hand and pushed her down, and she was pretty upset about that. So I just want
Sorry to hear that. Do you think if he knocked her down that the school would have called one of us? Or talked
I
to
don't know.
her?
I think the teacher was distracted because that's what I asked her, is if she'd gone to the teacher and said anything, but she said the teacher was dealing with another kid at that point.
Is she
so
okay?
I think she's going to be fine, but I just kind of wanted to bring it to your attention because I don't know if there's like an issue between the two of them or if this might be a one-time thing, so
Okay,
I didn't know.
appreciate that. He's not usually aggressive. I'm not sure what may have gone on that he would have acted like that, but I'll definitely talk to him about it.
Well, I'll talk to her too, just to, more about sharing and things like that so that there's not going to be a conflict that gets physical
Absolutely.
hopefully in the future, so.
Okay, great. Well, thanks for letting me know.
Sure.
Well done. You guys are just too reasonable.
We've done that one before.
Yeah, I was gonna say, did you pull that out of your past somewhere? Like, oh yeah, I've been there. So, very good. Well, and again, all of these are just role plays, and a real life situation is always going to be much more difficult. But again, if you can keep these ideas in mind when you do run into a situation where you might have a conflict with someone else, or if you're mediating a conflict between your employees, it's good to fall back on this and take charge of the situation. It's obviously the whole idea about enhancing your communication skills and being better at it is to end up being more productive in the long run. But a lot of these things obviously translate to your real life as well. So, do you guys have any questions or any other comments or any other anecdotes you want to share? No? Well, thank you so much for coming and participating, and
Thank you.
you've gotten a good response. Thank you very much.
I want to thank all of you for coming, and if you could please fill out your evaluation, and I hope everybody signed in. And the next one will be April 21st at 8:30, and it's gathering leads and converting leads to prospects. Buddy Young will be doing that one. And it's
What
gonna
was
be
the date?
Yeah,
Where's he working?
April
Office
21st.
Alliance.
Office Products Alliance.
Office
uh-huh.
Products Alliance. I knew something like that.
So, the 21st at 8:30 at the chamber office. We're going to start doing it at the chamber office because we've upgraded our facilities there, so. And thank you, Jeremiah, for
Oh, thank you.
videoing.
Yes.